Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today on another episode of the Entrepreneurial Mindset Show. If you don't know me, my name is Florin Lungu. I'm so delighted that you've chosen to tune in today and learn more about entrepreneurship. In this show, we're going to look at the courageous mindset. This is one of those 12 essential mindsets that entrepreneurs, have to develop and successful entrepreneurs excel at. And we're looking at how can we shift from having this mindset where we feel taking the next step is risky into believing in ourselves and looking at things and saying, well, I'll figure it out because when we look at courage, right, when we look at courageous mindset, part of the word courage, if you know French, is cœur, right? Cœur means heart. And so we're looking at someone being wholeheartedly invested into their business, into their idea, into their projects, into living their dreams, right? And so, how can someone be wholeheartedly invested into an idea, a business, a career, if they're not sure that they have the resources that they need in order for them to create the results that they're looking creating? Now, you would see that in this show we're gonna look at some different concepts, and one of them is where we say that risk, it's a myth, that there is not such a thing as risk, because the only way for us to feel risky, to feel something is risky, is if we feel that we lack the resources to bring forward whatever it is that we're searching and we're looking, we wanted to create in our lives. So I don't want to divulge more than what I already got, from this lesson, and I want you to tune in and to engage with that. So if you want to use the entrepreneurial action guide. So for each of these lessons, we create an entrepreneurial action guide, which summarize kind of the key points of the lesson, but also includes some coaching questions and also, space for you to take notes and jot down your thoughts. Because if you are like me, you like to write down on paper, you like to have something that you are able to write on and then have that and be able to analyze kind of your thoughts in, later on. So if you want to use the entrepreneurial guide for this specific show, go to entrepreneurialmindsetshow.com, and you're able to to download that. And also, by filling that form and downloading the guide, you'll be then reminded every time we release a new episode. So this is something that we do every Monday at 5 p.m. Stockholm time. That will be 11 p.m. Eastern time in the US. So today we're going to look at the courageous mindset, and I'm going to shift between the slides here. So I'm going to give you, a minute for you to go and download your guide, and as I bring the slides forward, and then we're going to look at some ideas here that I prepared for us. Okay, good. Right on. Okay. So one of the key things that we want to know and we want to understand when we look at mindset is what mindset is, right? And this is kind of a reminder for us that mindset is a set of attitudes, beliefs, expectations that we have about the situation or an outcome. And I would say about the world in general, and how the world operates. And if you think about what that is, right? If you think about mindset be a set of attitudes, beliefs, and expectations about ourselves and the world and how the world operates, isn't that essential to any kind of results? Because if mindset is my expectation and my belief about myself and the marketplace and how the world operates, wouldn't that be kind of the basis, the structure that I would use for me to take action and can create results? I think it would, right? So that's why we think, mindset matters, right? If you would like to say, Florian, why are you teaching on mindset? Why is that so important? Just because of that, right? Because if you think about what we just said, mindset is a set of beliefs and expectations. Well, isn't that true that my expectation on a situation or an outcome will determine how much action would I take? I think it is, right? So, with that understanding in mind, we're looking at mindset being something that, you know, shows up in everything we do, right? We say that there are learning models that we have created in our life, and that those learning models, show up in different areas of our lives. So in other words, how we do one thing is how we do everything. Like if you're organized into your private life, if you're organized, if your room is organized, like now, if you will come in and just see this room, this hotel room that I'm in right now, and you see if this is organized, if it's clean, if things are in order, then you would know that that's the way I also operate in other areas of my life. Or if you see everything is like just thrown around here and then it's complete mess, then you would know already that's maybe one of my weaknesses, and it's no way for me to be disorganized in my private life but be very organized in my business. That's not the case. So we have these patterns, right? We have these models, and we use them, right, in order for us to make things simple, right? We want to create these habits, these models, because we want to not need to think every single time when we need to do something new. We just reuse those models. But what if the models do not serve us, right? What if these models become our kind of habits of expecting what will happen, right? What if this is actually not serving us? What do we do then, right? So that's why we have this show. That's why we want you to look at how those principles, this mindset that we're discussing right now, how do they show up in your life? You know, what are you expecting? If we look at this definition from Paul Schiller, which I really really like, I think he summarizes best, right? He says that the mindsets, right, that we express become the habits of expecting, and set as the expectation about how you and the world operate. And what he's saying is that you know my mindset, my approach to something becomes the habit of expecting what the outcome would be. In other words, I give this example of me being on a business trip in Arizona, and when my thinking was that when it's dark at night, it should be cooler, right? And so I never been to such a place like that, and I was in Phoenix, and there was probably around 42, I think, was the highest temperature that I ever felt, right? So it was 42 centigrade, and it was really, really, really extreme hot. And then, we finish what we had to do. We go to the hotel, and then we go out at night to just to have some food. And when I was inside the hotel, 25 degrees, this was, you know, um, climatized, so AC and everything. And when the doors opened of that hotel and I stepped out, I was shocked by a heat wave, because my experience, my past experience was, when it's dark at night, it should be cooler, right? And it was cooler, but it was from 42 to 27. And I have never experienced 27 degrees at night. So what I'm saying here is that my expectation, right? My mindset towards how it should be when I step out of the hotel was that it should be cooler, and I need maybe even a jacket. But it was a huge shock for me to feel that, because I had a different expectation. So my expectation of how would feel to step out of that hotel in Phoenix at night didn't match reality. And because it didn't match, my action was that I have a jacket with me, and when I step out, oh my God, this is still warm, and it's so humid. So what do I do with the jacket now? That was because I had a specific expectation about how the world will operate, and unfortunately that was not ingrained in reality. So that's why we look at this mindset, so you are able to also scrutinize those mindsets and look at them and see, are they really ingrained in truth? And if they are they serving me? And if they're not, what would be one of the a better serving one? So what we're looking at today will be the courageous mindset, right? This is the third mindset out of the 12 that we were going to cover in this Entrepreneurial Mindset Show. And so we're looking at moving from feeling that it's risky, and us believing that we don't have the resources to bring this forward, to believing in ourselves, and believing that we'll figure it out, right? And so one of the quotes that summarize this very well is what Mark Zuckerberg says: the biggest risk is not taking any risk. Because he says, in a world that's changing really quickly, the only strategy that is guaranteed to fail is not taking a risk. So he's not talking about taking risk. He's talking about not taking a risk. And then when someone says, well, I just want the things to be just the way they are, or I just want this world to go back to how it was before COVID, right? Well, unfortunately, there is not going to go back to where it was before COVID. And if you say that, you're just announcing your ignorance to the law of vibration, because you know that everything in the universe it's in a constant change, right? And nothing is static. There is no such thing as inertia. So if we just stay put, hoping that things will get back to normal, well, that's the riskiest thing we could do. So that's why we should look at this risk taking differently, and that's what we want to do today. We want to help you look at risk differently. And if you want to have some really good questions and have this, summarized into a really nice entrepreneurial action guide, go to entrepreneurialmindsetshow.com and download the entrepreneurial guide for this specific lesson, and then follow along and fill in the blanks, and then answer the questions, and really think through this lesson with me. So another thing that really resonates with me was what Gary Vee says. He says that life shrinks and expands on the proportion of your willingness to take risks and try new things. That's why I really believe that this risk-taking mindset, it's one of the most important qualities an entrepreneur has. And that's why we want to give you a little bit of a different perspective here, and see, maybe you got, as me, this different understanding of what risk is. And because we train like that, we've been trained to look at risk in a certain way. We're not really taking risk as much as we could, because you know we've been programmed that way. And that's why I really wanted you to contemplate a little bit and look at, how do you define risk, right? Are you contemplating, around risk? From where does this idea of risk came first in your mind? Who said that it was risky, right? And I remember my grandfather, he always told me, um, stay in the place that you know. He had a saying that I'm not sure that it really translates in English, but he says, like, um, take the grass that you know rather than the grass that you don't know. In other words, like, look at your yard. You see, there is grass in your yard here. So don't look for other. Don't go for promises. Don't go somewhere else for promises. And that was his learning model of creation. And he was well intentioned. He wanted to pass on this you know um, wisdom to me. But what happens is that was his learning model, and then he he's been born in the same village. He traveled a little bit, but he died in the same village. So and he married just across the street, right? So imagine, my grandmother and him, my grandfather, just live, vis-a-vis, across the street. So he didn't really, took big risk, or venture into business or something like that. So that was his learning model of achievement. And so when he says that, for me, it's risky to maybe move from this city to another city, or maybe move to Sweden. He was still alive when we moved to Sweden, so he had to he got to experience this, right? And so again, he was a little bit concerned about our safety. I mean, really, should you take risks? Should you go to Sweden? You don't even know the language. What are you going to do there? And so we really want to challenge this wisdom, right? We want to challenge the wisdom and say, is it really safe better than sorry? That's the wisdom that we want to challenge. Is really, safe? Is it better than being sorry? And what does it mean to, better safe than sorry? Try to explain that to someone. What does it mean better safe than sorry? Because from my understanding, I mean, if I don't take any risk, and if I don't take any action, if I don't follow my dreams, what happens is that, well, I'm not satisfied. I'm not growing, and I'm not happy. So is that even better? Because what they're trying to do, our parents and people around us that maybe try to protect us, they're trying to keep us away from taking risk because they don't want us to fail, right? But I don't know that they're doing us a disservice, because if we don't take any kind of action, if we don't take any kind of risk, we're not really going to live life at the fullest, and we're not going to really experience life. So what we're doing here, we want to look at, is it really is it really better safe than sorry, and ask ourselves, how did how did this came out, right? I mean, from where, when, and how did a generalized concept like this one, better safe than sorry, right, become so widely accepted that as a process of thinking that is like it has this taught immunity that no one actually challenges, and is passed on from generation to generation to generation, and no one really challenged. Where does this come from? Is it even serving someone? What does it mean to be better safe than sorry, right? So that's what we want to do. We don't want to just rely on mass consciousness and mass awareness. We really want to think into these activities here, right? So what we want to do is we want to be aware that as human beings, right, at the highest creation of God and the universe, we are able to choose, right? We have the reasoning factor. And the challenge here is that because we think we can choose, we also think we could actually choose to escape the consequence. Like, for example, someone will say, well, I don't buy into this law of gravity. And I say, well, I don't care if you buy in this law of gravity or not. We are here at the fifth floor. If you want to jump from this fifth floor, I mean, you would buy in that law of gravity immediately. So I don't care if you buy or not into that. You're free to choose, but you're not free from the consequences of your choice, right? So you're free to choose, but you're not free from the consequences of your choice. And if you think out what is life and what is business and where we are today, life, it's a sum of decisions we made up until now. So I am here in this hotel room in Sweden, sharing this with you because of decisions that I made in my life. That's why I'm here. This is how I end up here. So you are where you are because of decisions you made, right? And so when we think about courageous minds, when we think about risk taking, one of the challenges with risk taking is because a problem it's something that is very general, is that at some point in time we chosen to actually shift from decision making being a process where someone looks at what is the best option, to decision making becoming a process where we look at if something is risky or not. Like, if you think about that, so decision making was at one point in time, and should still be, a process where we're choosing between our best options, right? So that makes sense. Decision making is like, have certain options and I choose the best one for me, right? But the problem is that so many of us, and depending when in time you've done that, you know you chosen to actually shift from, instead of looking at the best options, because the best options could be also risky at times, right? So now we're not even looking at the best options. The problem is that we're looking at the less risky option. And isn't that true, that the less risky option doesn't necessarily is the best option? So at some point we moved from a decision making to a risk taking decision. So decision making was at one point, and it should still be, choosing between your best options. But now what happens is that instead of us choosing between the best options, we're evaluating risk and we're deciding if we should take a risk or not. And so what happens is that I didn't really realize, it has not occurred to me that I was creating this decision making process in my life, right? That we operate on learning models, and that those learning models are based on our best thinking up until now, and we created those to make things easier for us, so we don't have to think into all of our decisions. So this way, I'm making decisions based off a model, right? And I just shared at the very beginning, right? That how we do everything is part of a learning model, right? Because we learn how to make decisions, And if my decision making now is more of a risk evaluating, process rather than really deciding what's the best option for me, well, although we say that choice, it's a function of awareness, which means that I'm able to choose if I'm aware, right? So when I'm aware, I'm able to choose between those best options. The problem is that if I'm looking at decision making more like evaluating risk and looking at what is the less risky option for me rather than looking at what's the best option, am I really choosing, right? So although we say choice, it's a function of awareness. Well, that also has a bottleneck, because if you're not aware that you have more options, do you really choose, right? So if my choice was actually based on my grandfather, experience, and he shared with me that I should better stay in the place that I am because I have a stable job rather than going after promises, right? And I have not developed the awareness that I can choose, and that there are more options than just that. I don't really choose, right? So here is where the biggest problem lies, is because our biggest problems as human beings is the lack of awareness. If we're not aware that we have more options, that there is more choices, and that maybe what we see now to be the less risky option is not actually the best option for us, if we don't have that awareness, unfortunately, we're not going to choose what is best for us. So that's why I say, well, this is really great information, and it's absolutely it's vital that we ask ourselves these questions. But there are some things that we are not able to do alone. That's why we need help. At one point in time, we need to acknowledge and say, well, I get what Florin says there. I can do so much with analyzing my thoughts and looking at my past, but then there is one point that I'm gonna be stuck, because I'm too emotionally involved in my own life to give myself the best advice, to give myself the best option. So that's why we need someone outside of us, like a coach or a mentor, to help us think differently, look differently, and see more options, right? Because that's what a mentor does. That's what a really good mentor does. They see more options. They are able to bring you a different perspective that you're not able to see yourself. They're increasing your level of awareness, and say the same a coach, right? So a coach will be able to help you see the resources and see those models that you use in the past. And we look at this, we call this the timeline exercise, and this is part of our coaching program, right? So if you're interested to engage in a coaching program through these 12 different mindsets, send an email to florin@florinlungu.com, florin@florinlungu.com, and I'm going to be able to help you there. And the first thing that we do in that 6 months coaching program is that we take people through what we call to be the timeline exercise, to identify the learning models in their experience up until now, and then analyze those learning models and say, okay, how can I use this learning model in another area of my life? Because they had success in the past. Because they had success in the past, they're able to duplicate that success. They are able to do it again. But most of us, we're not aware of how did we get up until here. We need someone else to help us in this process, and that's one of the key elements of the coaching program. We go and analyze and look at your life and see how did you create results up until now, and we analyze that model and we identify the elements of the model, and then we help you duplicate that and apply that again and again. That's the transformation. So you can do a lot by yourself, but then acknowledging that you need help from outside, it's also a sign of awareness. Now, we discussed a little bit about how did we end up to actually look at what is the less risky option rather than what's the best option for me. And let's look a little bit what's risk, right? So what is risk? We say risk, it's exposure to a chance of injury or a loss or hazard, or maybe even a dangerous chance, right? So we don't want any of that. Of course, There is real risk in this world, and we don't want us to be exposed to any of that. But what if the risk that we're actually facing, every single day is not that kind of risk? We're not talking now here about you doing anything that is physically risky. The problem is that we're now looking at more of the imaginated risk. We say that risk it's a hallucination, it's a myth, because what happens is that many times we run a negative scenario in our minds. What's the worst thing that could happen? And because of that imaginated fact and that imaginated situation, we choose not to take action. So we're not talking about, imagine the risk that someone living in like our ancestors, they were living in caves, they were living in the wild, in the forest, and they faced real risk. But in today's world, well, there is not that much of a risk that we're facing, that kind of risk. The risk that we're looking at today is more like, well, the risk of failure, right? The fear of criticism, right? I risk to maybe, I don't know, lose some time or some resources in my business. So we're not looking at those, life and death situation anymore. We're looking at taking action towards something that is unknown, and because it's unknown we feel it's risky. But successful entrepreneurs have mastered this thing, that they are able to courageously take those risks, right? And we don't even call them calculated risk. It's actually something that is even beyond that. It's they trust themselves to such a degree until they don't feel it's risky. Because what we believe about risky, it's because if we labeled us taking action and trying something new as being risky, then isn't that true that this belief will hold us back from taking more action because we feel it's risky? So we're not even talking about decision making anymore. Now we're talking about if something we feel is risky or not, and based off if we feel it's risky or not, we decide if we should take action or not. And many times the risk is imaginated. That's why we say risk it's a hallucination. The very real hallucination around risk taking is that most people operate from, is that there is a lack of resources within them. That's the very real risk, is that they believe they don't have the resources. They believe that somehow they're incomplete, that somehow they're not worthy. And so it's impossible for us to perceive something or a situation to be risky without seeing ourselves in that situation, without the resources necessary for us to bring forward to create what it is that we're looking for creating. So that's why there is not such a thing as risk, because we cannot actually have this situation. We cannot be in a risky situation unless unless we see ourselves lacking resources. And when we see ourselves that we actually have the resources, when we see ourselves that when we believe in ourselves, like successful entrepreneurs, if you look at them, they they don't have a self-confidence issue. They don't have a self-belief issue. That's probably the one of the strongest assets that they have, is that they believe in themselves and they believe in their idea. They don't need more of that. That's something that they all express. So there is not such a thing as risk when you see yourself and as fully resourced, and you operate from the awareness that you have all the resources that you need inside of you. And that's a mindset, right? This is a way of thinking. That's why it's so important. You don't have to know all of the 13 steps of your plan and how we're gonna make them. You only need to know step one and two. And after you take step one and two, then you're able to take the next steps. You don't need to see the whole staircase to take the first two steps. So that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at the idea that successful entrepreneurs have a completely different mindset when it comes to taking risk and taking action, and being courageous and courageously following their dreams. And when you are purposely driven, when you know what you want and you have your idea, as successful entrepreneurs, you can make purpose driven decisions. And it's only one question that we should ask ourselves. So when we know what it is that we want, and then we know our purpose and we know why we're doing what we're doing, it's only one question we should ask ourselves. If I act on this idea, will it move me closer to my goals and in the direction of my purpose? Yes or no? That's the only question. So if I act on this idea, would it move me closer to my goals? And is it in alignment with my purpose? Yes or no? And if it is, you act. So that's the question that we should ask ourselves. Not if it's risky or not. Not how long it's going to take. If I act on this idea, would it move me closer to my dream? If you had someone like me coaching you through this program, through this process, would it help you move in the direction of your dream? I believe it will. So that's what we want to ask ourselves. Not if it's risky or not if I have the resources or not. If I act on this idea, would it move me in the direction of my dreams? Yes or no? Because the only moment when risk becomes a reality is when we see ourselves as lacking resources, when we are not operating and we're not living in our full potential, and we're not living from this possibility mindset, right? When we are in our head thinking and contemplating and that there is not going to be enough resources, that we're not going to have the time, that we're not going to have the money, that we're not going to have the skills, and when we play in that negative scenario, that worst case scenario, and we're not looking at the possibility scenario, that's when risk becomes a reality. And that's when we really create that risky situation in our life. Because it's a lot riskier not to take any action rather than taking action and learning something from that action. So if we summarize what we discussed today, we said that in order for us to be able to continually taking next steps in our business, we need to learn and grow. And as we learn and grow, and we accumulate beliefs from our parents, from our experiences, and those beliefs actually create decision-making models that we apply on our lives. And that the life that we live today, it's a series of decisions that we made up until now, but also that we could choose the best option available. And we share that if you're not aware that there is more option than the one that you see, if you only see one or two options, of course, you're not going to make the best decision for yourself because you don't see the other options. And you cannot choose something that you cannot see. So we really kind of we always choose the best option from what we believe it's possible. So that's why, again, if I believe I'm not resourced to start a new program, to create a workshop, if I'm not resourced in order for me to maybe employ someone on my team to help me with the part of my business. If I feel I don't have the resources, well, of course I'm not going to choose that. But because I'm not going to choose that I'm not really choosing the best option, right? And what will the successful entrepreneur say? Well, I don't know how I'm going to pull this together, but I'll figure it out. I know I need a salesperson, so I'm gonna hire a salesperson, and I'm gonna figure out how I'm gonna pay the person, or how I'm gonna help them pay themselves, right? How I'm gonna help them, bring in the results that will pay their salaries. That's what a successful entrepreneur would say. That's the courageous mindset. That's the risk-taking mindset. And so the kind of the fifth thing here, the fifth kind of steps is that choice is a function of awareness. And like we just said, if we're not aware of the options that we have in front of us, we're not going to choose those. And so now the difference between a courageous mindset and a play it safe mindset is that in one case we're getting what we want, but in the other case we're looking at we have all of this security of this job or this house or this situation, and we're losing that. So in one scenario we're looking at getting what we want, and the other scenario we only focus on what we lose. In a courageous risk-taking mindset, we step forward into our growth rather than stepping back into safety. We play to win rather than playing not to lose, right? we're loving what we want, and compared with the other kind of mindset, we're hating what we don't want. We're hating what we don't want. We say, well, I don't want to struggle anymore. I hate this job, right? Instead of saying, I love my free time. So it's a completely different mindset. We operate from courage and abundance rather than scarcity and fear. We live on the higher side of our nature rather than the lower side of our nature. We criticize, we have a stingy ego that comes to the surface, instead of believing that we have infinite potential. We are abundant and joyful, and then we see life as a series of possibilities rather than scarcity and misery and trying to get a bigger piece of the pie. And we believe everything is going to be okay rather than believing that everything is going to crash, that the world goes to an end. And in this case, in the first case, risk is a perception, and we know it's a perception, rather than in the other case where risk is reality. We believe all of those things. So of course it's real. Of course it's risky. Don't you see COVID and everything, and how many people lost their jobs? Are you nuts? You're moving to Denmark right now? That's risky, right? But we know that risk is just a perception. And when I'm anxious about taking the next step, what I learned to do, it's actually I learned to work with that fear, right? So if I have an anxiety about the next step that I'm gonna take, I want to stay with that a little bit, right? Because you hear people say, well, remove your fear, be fearless. I don't know if someone could be fearless, because removing fear is like removing red from the color spectrum, right? Or you say, I want to remove red from the rainbow. Well, you cannot do that. That's a color. Exactly like fear and anxiety are a vibrational frequency. And so instead of me trying to remove my fear and be fearless, because courageous doesn't mean fearless, not at all. Courageous is like I learn to listen to my fears, and when I'm afraid, when I'm anxious about my next step, there's only one thing that says about me. It says that I'm not fully prepared, and I could do more preparation. That I haven't really considered the situation, and so what it says to me, it says that I can prepare more, and the more prepared I am, the less anxious I am, the less fearful I am, because I know my strengths. Of course, when I've done this first time and live, of course it was risky. Of course it was risky, because I haven't done it many times, and I didn't really know how this works all together, and I didn't really know how the flow and everything. But now it's not risky anymore. It's natural. I hear people tell me, "Oh, well, you seem so cool." Yeah, of course, I seem so cool. Now I've been doing these videos one a day for the now. It's 2 years since I started. One video a day. So that's do the math. It's more than 600, 700 videos. Of course, after 700 videos, I'm not confident and relaxed and natural. Well, then this is not for me. I don't feel it's risky right now because I've been there, I've done it. But at the very beginning, of course, I felt it's risky because I was not prepared. I didn't do, rehearsals and maybe stream into a group that I know it was safe, and then analyze myself and then look at the recording and all of those things, right? So when you're looking at doing something the first time, right? I mean, you can increase your chances of success by trying similar things, or trying smaller steps before you take the big jump, and build on that confidence. And when you feel anxious or fearful, then you look at, well, what does this fear tries to tell me? What is that I didn't consider? What's the aspect that maybe I'm missing? Then jump on a program like this, and have a coach, have a thinking partner that you can call when you need, that you can email when you need, and say, well, Florin, I'm facing this and I feel like that. Help me understand, help me think through this. And that's the power of having a mentor and a coach. And I really want to leave you with this one. There are risks and costs to any plan of action, but they are far less than the long range risk and cost of comfortable inaction. I really believe that. There are risks to everything, but it's more risky not doing anything. And so, if you want to improve your entrepreneurial mindset, if you really would want us to dive deeper into this topic, send an email to florin@florinlungu.com, and I will be glad to get in touch with you and connect with you and see if our entrepreneurial mindset program fits you. Because I really believe this is going to be a game changer for you if you just want to give it a try. So if you feel you want more, and if you feel you're ready to maybe trial it, at least, try this program, give it a try. Email florin@florinlungu.com, and I will be glad to share all the details of the entrepreneurial mindset coaching program with you. And next week, we're going to look at the value-added mindset. The value-added mindset, when we look at moving from extracting value from the marketplace, from the clients, from our network, to adding value to people. I believe this is one of the essential traits of a successful entrepreneur. They always look at adding more value than they extract. They always look at, always overwhelming their clients and their network with value. So when they're asked for an investment, their clients will be very happy to pay for that, because I got so much value that now I'm happy to pay for this, for this, because the value I got far exceeds my investment. That's what we want for you, and I hope this